awesomtraining.tv. My name is Margaret. I'll be your broadcast engineer for today. Hope y'all are having a lovely day. Hey, Wim, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. You?
Good, thank you. I am having I'm having Wim this week and Todd this week. So FileMaker 2025 is out. And FileMaker, it's 2025 or 2022, depends on what you're looking, either the marketing version or the version number. Um, a big part of this release is AI has some serious teeth now. And so you can really use it and develop with it. Now the problem is that since it now has serious teeth, a lot of people want to get into it, and it's kind of overwhelming. While AI is new, it is iterating really quickly. It is changing very quickly, and as a result, we're all kind of like flailing to keep up, which is why we're doing a lot of sessions on this. Wim has been really fantastic. Todd will also be here starting from the beginning to the end as well. Basically, they're discussing what is AI and how to use it in FileMaker over the course of a week. So I highly recommend you watch all these presentations. It'll allow you to really understand how to apply it in your own FileMaker development. So with that being said, real fast, I'm going to talk about this because I forgot about this yesterday. I was like, I'm missing something. My presentation in the beginning usually takes a little bit longer. Real quick. First of all, Wim and Slint have a really amazing blog that you guys should go check out. They publish a lot of amazing. I need some links from you from that, Wim, so I can share that out. They published a lot of really amazing stuff on FileMaker. They have a lot of amazing sample files of their own. They do a lot of good training. We also do, obviously, a lot of training. Our training is more video based. This is a bad time for me to lose my voice. My training is more video based. Every once in a while, I get people who watch our streams and they go like, I really like the stream, but I struggle with the format. We do a very conversational format where we interact with the presenter as a general rule. That doesn't work for everyone. If you want to talk about FileMaker or learn about FileMaker in very specific chunks of time and video, we have a lot of highly detailed videos that cover pretty much every topic underneath the sun to get you from I don't know anything about FileMaker to a competent intermediate developer. They last around last one we were for like 4 minutes to I think 30 at the max, but most are 30 at the max, but most are about 10. With that all being said, now that I've let people drift in, because it always takes people a while to meander in here, Wim, what are we doing today?
All right. Well, today we will continue on what we built on in the last couple of days, right? So Monday, Tuesday, we spent a lot of time on the foundational stuff, right? Like the basics. What's a model? What does that look like? What types of models are there? And we link that to the functionality that we have in FileMaker. Um, and just like what we said in the last couple of days, I want people to bring their questions, right? Because now's the time to ask those questions. Now's the time to get those foundations poured really well, so that we can build on that for this, which is really just the beginning of that AI journey for all of us, and for a slew of AI features that I'm sure is going to come to FileMaker and pretty much anything that we do, anything that we build. So it's kind of important to get all the basics right, and that's what we have been doing for the last couple of days. Today and tomorrow, we will make it a little more practical by bringing it into what FileMaker is bringing us, what Claris gives us. Specifically, we're going to spend a lot of time with the Claris AI model server, right? So that you can host your own AI models on-prem or self-cloud hosted or third-party cloud hosted. Doesn't really matter. So that's what we'll be talking about today.
Interesting. I'm looking forward to it.
I
So,
want to start the day with basically linking back to something that was said yesterday. There was a question yesterday that hinted at agentic AI, right? So the stuff that I have on the screen here. Agentic AI, all of the AI stuff that we've been talking about so far in the last couple of days, specifically the one that where we're talking about text generation, which is the AI model for chatting, right? Like ChatGPT, when you go to Claude or Anthropic's website, that kind of thing, or the stuff that you use in your coding, VS Code or anything like that, or Claude Code or a Cursor, that kind of stuff. All of that is text generation things. But it just gives you information, right? Right? It can't really do anything for you to some extent. Like some of these things like Cursor can obviously write code for you, but code is just text. It's just like a different form of answer. But you can't really make it send an email, for instance, right? Or if we tie it to a FileMaker solution, it can't run a script or create a record for that matter in your database. Uh, Text generation cannot, is what I'm saying, right? What can is called agentic AI, where you have an agent, something that can do something, and it can do something based on your conversation with the text generation model, right? So in our and I'll send you the links after this session, Margaret, so that you have the in in the Soliant executive summary for FileMaker 22, I have an example of that, of like a conversation with a text generation model, and it goes something like that, where you go, help me draft an email that I want to send to our to anybody who hasn't really bought anything from us in the last 3 months, right? And so the text generation will create a draft email. You iterate a few times, where I go like, take out that sentence, change that, change the wording or the tone. At the end of the conversation, you have a draft email, right? But now you would have to copy it, paste it in your email, and send it. Agentic AI would be where you then tell you have that draft, but that you build together with your chat bot, if you will. If you could just say, go ahead and send it to these team, do the search in the FileMaker database and send this email to those 10 people. That's agentic AI, right? Where it can take an action. And what I have on the screen here is MCP. You'll hear a lot about MCP. If you haven't already, MCP is nothing more than a protocol, just like HTTPS is a protocol, right? MCP is just that. It's a protocol. It describes a particular way of doing things. Uh, uh, so people use the shorthand MCP servers, which are really servers that follow the MCP standards or the protocol, and you link those to you have your client over here, the thing that you chat with, right? You type your question and it gives you the answers, and then over here on that side, actually, I can show you that instead of talking about it. It would look something like this, right? So your chat agent is the thing on the left. That's you talking to the text generation model. Over on the right-hand side, you have your FileMaker server. What sits in the middle really is an MCP server, a model context protocol server that can translate whatever instructions you give it into actions, whether it's sending an email, doing something in MailChimp, or doing something in FileMaker, right? Um, and this is where the data API and the OData API comes into play, because with those, you can do pretty much anything you want, including running scripts, right? Um, so you could build something that is not FileMaker, right? Like a not FileMaker layout or not FileMaker solution, but something that is more like a chat agent that people can interact with, and still it can trigger and do workflows in your FileMaker database. So that's where all of this is going, right? We don't have agentic AI right now in FileMaker 22. Like there's no features, not even in Claris's AI model server that does this. And uh, it's sort of like a common thread in a lot of these things that we said Monday and Tuesday, but that doesn't mean that you're dead in the water. You can still do these things, right? Because FileMaker supports these standards, data API, OData API, MCP servers they can interact with any kind of API, including the FileMaker APIs, right? So it's entirely doable. You would just have to create your own MCP server, and I know that Todd will very likely talk about this in a lot more detail next week. I know that they're playing with MCP servers. We're playing with MCP servers because it's the next thing, that the next wave of AI that's coming, which will make for really great integrations between stuff that you do on the AI side, even if it's not in FileMaker, and then your FileMaker solutions, right?
Okay, that makes sense. I've heard a lot about like some of the most common questions I've seen pop up in my chats is like, are they adding MCP? Can you use MCP? What is MCP? So there's
Yep.
a lot of fixation about it, understandably so.
Yep. Think of an MCP. Like I said, MCP is just a protocol. It's a prescribed way of doing things, right? That's really what a protocol is, right? It explains that if you put something together in a particular format, it'll work, right? You need, of course, something to execute it, but there's plenty of things that can execute MCPs. Um, it really comes down to just writing a configuration file, which is going to be JSON that explains where your FileMaker server is, the credentials for your FileMaker server, for the account that you want to use for these things, and then the actions that you want to expose, right? So you describe your actions, and it could be an action would be, if we think like a business workflow, one of the actions could be approve an invoice, right?
Hmm.
Or yeah, let's stick with that. Approve an invoice. So in the description, you would say, well, my FileMaker server, and because we're using the OData API and Data API, it's really just a URL, right? Because the OData and Data APIs use port 443, so it's an HTTPS. And then the action would be named approve an invoice, and you would define the OData call that is tied to that action, which would basically probably be run this script and pass in this parameter, right? It's really that simple. There's nothing complex about MCP servers, but they pack a lot of power.
Got it. And I'm sure that seems intimidating for people who aren't used to working with OData or APIs yet, which is okay. Got it. That makes sense.
Yep. It's agreed, right? If this is the first time that you'll get into FileMaker API integrations, you're right. It can feel like a lot, right? Because you have this to worry about, like what does it even mean? Like, what do I download to have an MCP server? That kind of thing, right?
Hmm.
There's going to be a lot of resources coming in, I'm sure, in the next couple of months in our FileMaker community around this stuff. Um,
Yes.
so if you don't feel like doing that kind of research, if that's overwhelming, just sit tight. Like a lot of good stuff is coming.
Yes. And I assume at some point we'll probably have people on host to talk about this, I am sure. So,
Absolutely. And I don't know exactly what Todd is going to talk about next week, but it would surprise me very much if he didn't talk about MCP servers.
yes, that would be a peak Todd discussion point. Uh,
Exactly. He may even show you one in action, right? So yeah.
yes, we do have a quick question. I thought that there was an agentic option on the generate text script step? Question mark.
That's right. The what we're talking about here is this one, right? Go back to my chat. Generate response from model. That's the one. And there's an agentic mode in here. Also, we talked yesterday about tools calling and function calling a little bit. That sort of like drifts in the direction of getting things done, right? Because these things can call a custom function in FileMaker, or they can run and execute SQL in FileMaker. So it goes in that direction. That's this tools call here. Agentic mode is actually, I can probably just bring up the help for that one. Not this one, not this one, this one, this one. And no, wanted to get to this. Oh, no, that's not the one I wanted to do. Generate response from model is the one that we were after. Right. So this is what agentic mode does, right? And it's not tied to an MCP server, right? So let's get that clear, because I said that in the FileMaker 22 features, there's nothing about MCP, but this speaks to that thing that leans closer to MCP or to actions, that tools calling, right? So you have on and off, and when you have it on, it basically can think of it almost as recursion to some extent. It's a really bad analogy, but it comes close, right? Where if the question you're asking requires the model to invoke some of these tools, and there's multiple things that it needs to invoke, agentic mode will do all of them, right? Non-agentic mode will stop after the first one, right? So
Oh, okay. So if you want to go through the list of tools to grab all and use all the tools, you turn on agentic mode? Okay.
yeah, the I'm struggling to come up with a very nifty use case that would explain it really well, right? Because the use case I used yesterday for tools calling was uh, you you need to you need the model to use information that the model just doesn't have, right? Like, and I
Hmm.
use the what's the weather in Antwerp today, right? Because
Hmm.
the model, it was trained on information from up to a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago. Like, there's no way that it would know what the weather is, right? So
Yes.
that's what a tools call is. So other classic examples that you'll find everywhere is like flight schedules. Is my flight on time, right? Like, the model wouldn't know. Like, it cannot like look into the future when it was built, or what is the current stock price for something, right? Um, so what I'm struggling with example wise is I can't come up with a use case that would require multiple tools in quick succession, right? Or it would have to be something where you want to compare the weather in two different locations or something like that, right? It would have
Ah,
to
yeah.
make a tools call for the one location, then make another tools call for the other location. So something along those lines.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
All right. Also, something that came up yesterday was, and I'm showing the wrong screen. Am I showing the wrong screen? I am showing the wrong screen.
Currently seeing a very nifty terminal.
Yeah, that was actually my MCP server.
I did see MCP in there, so I was like,
Yep,
oh,
yeah. I was playing with with running an MCP server just before we came to this. We had a question yesterday about um, the Claris AI model server, and we'll spend a lot of time on that today and tomorrow. Whether it covered all of the OpenAI API, right? So whether it would offer an endpoint on par with what OpenAI gives in their API, and my answer yesterday was no, it doesn't. It only provides certain endpoints, and these are the actual endpoints from the Claris AI model server. What we're looking at here is the log file. Think of it as the event log for the AI model server, right? So when it starts up, it logs a bunch of stuff, including what the endpoints are that it opens up, right? So, and no surprise, there's going to be an endpoint for each of the model type. Remember, three types of models: text embedding, image embedding, and text generation. So you'll have the text and image embedding and text generation, and then there's a fine-tune upload and a fine-tune train model endpoint. There's actually one more, and there's probably other more. I just never went out to look for them. Where's my insomnia? Here's my insomnia, right? So this one, V1 models, is another endpoint that actually works, right? Where you can interrogate your Claris AI model server to say, what models do you currently have available, right? Meaning, in this case, that you've downloaded, configured in the AI model server, and that kind of thing, right? So there's quite a few, but it's not on par with the full OpenAI API.
got it. That makes sense.
And we'll come back to this one, the models one, in a sec.
Hmm.
All right. So this is a slide that I showed yesterday where we talked a little bit about the different sets of skills that we as FileMaker developers will need to develop, to acquire, to become proficient at as we go deeper into our AI journey. So from here on forward, like today, tomorrow, we'll be talking about that first one, right? Understanding your deployment options, which is really, where is the model that you want to talk to? Is it at OpenAI, Cohere, Anthropic? Do you want to run your own? Do you want to put it in the cloud? Like those are your options, really. And understanding why you would choose one, not choose another one, but also understanding the consequences of doing that. Like if you choose to run your own models, you have to have the hardware for that. What does that look like, right? So that's really what we're going to talk about today. And we this was the last slide from yesterday, and it's actually the starting point for today, right? When you interact with the models, specifically from a business context, right? At some point, you will be wanting to have answers that you want to unlock that are in your data, right? Based on historically the data that you've gathered. And I'm really excited about this. It's what the main reason that I'm so excited about AI and what we can do in FileMaker. We do a lot of technology workshops with our clients where we go on site and we talk to the C-level people, CEOs, CIOs, CTOs, to basically talk technology, right? Like what's working for you, what's not working for you, where are your pain points, and then we come up with an action plan around those things. And one of my standard questions, long before AI became AI, was, what are some of the questions that you wish you could ask of your data? Right? Because you know that the answer is there. You just don't know how to get to it. And we mentioned this in the last couple of days. There's a lot you can do with native FileMaker reporting, right? We create finds and
Hmm.
we lay it all out properly. But a lot of this is hard coded. Like it's very difficult to just come up with an ad hoc question. Like it's sunny outside today. It's a Wednesday. which of my clients that haven't bought anything from me in the last 3 months should I call because they tend to respond well on Wednesday when it's sunny, right? Uh, Try to fit that into a FileMaker script to come up with the answer, right?
That script would be so long.
Yeah. And there's elements in that question, and it's not a stupid question, really, right? It's because it may give you a surprising answer that unlocks some business for you, right? And
Hmm.
I know it's a little bit of a stupid question,
No, I
but
get what you're saying. There's all sorts of little like specific factors that you would want to know about because people react differently to those factors, and trying to hard code that would be a giant pain in the butt because not only do you have to figure out that the factors even exist, but
exactly, right? Because the fact that it's Wednesday and that it's sunny, that's not stuff that is stored in your database, right? You what is stored is the date that you made a sale, right?
hmm.
But then you have to figure out is it a Wednesday and was it sunny that day, right? Which probably would mean you have to have set up some API integration to some weather API to figure out like was it even sunny and factor that into that kind of decision.
Hmm.
A lot of the FileMaker solutions that we built and that all of you build are somewhat transactional in nature, right? Meaning we start with, say, a lead, we track information about the lead, then we make a sale, we track information around the sale, we generate an invoice, and then we send that invoice off to QuickBooks Online, and then rinse repeat, right? But in that process, we've generated and collected a lot of data that is really, really useful, and
Hmm.
that we're I would say chronically underusing. That's really the promise of AI, right? The fact that you can now unlock secrets uh, of what AI can do. If I take you back all the way to the early minutes of Monday session, when we were talking about what a model is exceedingly good at finding patterns in data because that's what it was built to do, right?
Hmm.
So if we have the data, it's going to give us all sorts of patterns that we weren't even aware that are in there.
It finds all the hidden patterns that existed, but you simply had no way of knowing existed because you would have to go through all sorts of time-intensive nonsense to even figure it out.
Exactly, exactly. That would be exceedingly hard. So back to this slide, what it really means is that in order to get answers from that data, you'll need to send the data to the model, right? Or the model will have to have access to that data,
Ah.
um, which is not something that we should do lightly. And and to be honest, it's one of my biggest fears with AI and the current state of AI because it's all moving so fast. People to some extent have FOMO, right? Like fear of missing out, where they go like, I need to do something with AI because all my competitors are probably doing something with AI. I don't want to be the one left out. So that people move quickly with AI without thinking through all the consequences of what they're doing. That is my biggest fear, right? Like that we're taking shortcuts with privacy, with security, with all of that stuff, and we really shouldn't. It should be a consideration, not an afterthought. And I
Yeah.
mentioned this yesterday. We just talked about the models will have to have access to the data either by you sending it or it reading it through
Hmm.
something like MCP. Like if I give an MCP server access through the OData API to my data, it has access to my data, right? That's the whole point. Um, but it's more than data, right? Like some of the features that we have in FileMaker can help you build and execute SQL query, right? You type in your question in plain English, and it will give you the SQL query for the question that you just asked. The only way that it can do that is if it knows your solution, meaning the table structures, the fields, what fields you have in what tables, what they're named, that kind of stuff, right? And I mentioned this yesterday. That's what I mean with intellectual property, and and that too is something that we need to carefully consider whether we want to send that somewhere. That
Hmm.
because if you send it to somewhere that is not under your control, it's exactly that, right? Like you lose control over that. Where is it? Who has access to it? What it's being used for? All of these things are things that you need to consider. All right. So this is FileMaker's basic. That this is the first script step that you're going to use for all things AI, right? A configure AI account. Now, this script step doesn't call a model, right? It's just for your solution to know what model you want to use. So you basically give it a name. That's the first part. It can be any name, but this is not your account name. This is not your account name with OpenAI or Cohere or Anthropic. This is just a string. As long as it's unique, as long as you can remember it, because you'll be using it when you actually do these things. I typically put that in a custom function so that I don't have to repeat the same string over and over. You just name it, right? Name it cat, right? Something like that.
Yes.
And call it Henry. The next thing that you need to choose is which provider, like where is the AI model? So this is really your choice. And these are the things that FileMaker supports. And you've heard me say OpenAI, Anthropic, and Cohere many times over the last couple of days. And this is why, right? Like these are the top three there, or the commercial AI providers that Claris supports. The fourth one is called custom, and you choose custom when you set up your own Claris AI model server. And if it's not Claris AI model server, then any server that can host AI models that is OpenAI compatible. Well, I mentioned this a few times in the last couple of days, and this is where it comes together, right? Like custom means whatever it is, as long as it's OpenAI compatible, as long as it follows the same naming conventions for URL, for the payload, and for the response as OpenAI does.
Okay, that's what I was about to ask. What do you mean by OpenAI compatible? Okay,
Yeah.
so how it interacts has to be the same. Okay.
Yep, exactly. It's got to follow those rules. Right? So if you pick custom, you also have to provide an endpoint. You don't have to do that with OpenAI, Anthropic, and Cohere, because FileMaker is hard coded to know how to reach those, right? But if you do custom, you have to give it a URL, because remember, talking to an AI model, integrating with AI is just like any other API. It's just like any other REST call that you make, right? So, and that's why this is an HTTPS endpoint, just like any API would be, right? And then the last thing, it's a little cut off there, API key. Most of these, including the one that you set up yourself, you want to protect it with an API key, so that not just anybody can call your model, right? Or call
Yes,
your
that would
server.
be nice.
Yep. So this is how you configure, how you set up in your solution the the combination of where the model is, and well, that's really it. That's where the model is, right? Now, uh, don't think that you would use that script step just once, right? What I mean by this is something like this is entirely possible, right? Where I have one, two, three different configure AI accounts, right? As long as each one is named differently, and they are, right? So this one is called account, this one is called account OpenAI, and this one is called account Claude, right? There's nothing that prevents you from setting up different kinds of connections.
Oh, so you can set up multiple simultaneously. It's not going to immediately negate the
Absolutely.
one. Oh, okay. That's nice.
Yep. Yep. The Claris engineers, when they were on the show, were hinting at that a little. They call this the hybrid way, right? Where um, I didn't finish the thought about the sending your data and intellectual property, but the implied thing there, and this is what we as Aligned believe strongly in, is by default we would not use a commercial AI provider. Uh, Again, we're not dogmatic about it. There's going to be places where it's totally fine to use them, but if we're actually sending sensitive data or sending uh, sensitive intellectual property, our stance is going to be don't do it, right? Host your own models so that you have full control over where your data goes. Now, if you want to provide a little chat window in your solution that where people can check the weather, I'm not going to fall on my sword and say that's the kind of stuff that you have to host yourself, right? No, right?
But any kind of serious data transfer or
Yeah.
anything where you have to hand over your scheme or whatever. Yeah, that makes sense.
So
You'd want to do it to a local model.
exactly, right? So to bring it back to this, I can set up an OpenAI connection for anything that is what I call innocent. If we're not going to send data, but we need a response from a chat or from a text generation model, then why not, right? Again, at that point, it just becomes a cost equation thing. Like, do I want to pay OpenAI or do I want to invest in hardware and do it myself? If there are no security and privacy concerns with what you're doing, right? So I can use this one, the OpenAI one, for innocent stuff, but for a lot of my heavy duty stuff, for my sensitive stuff, I would use another Configure AI account named differently that talks to my endpoints where I host my own model. Make sense?
That makes sense. Quick question about Configure AI. Is it something that you just put in a startup script and then like fire and forget it, or would you put it at the beginning of the script that you're actually going to be generating response from models from?
It's a good question. I find myself just putting it in the open script. So that I have them, right?
Hmm.
At that point, when you run this, like again, it doesn't reach out to the model. It's just FileMaker knowing that you may want to be using these, and at some point when you do this generate response, then the account name that you put in here has to be the account name that you gave it here, right? So this is where you name things. This is where
Hmm.
you use the name.
Got it. Okay.
Right? So these I would just put in the open script because then I know that they've always run. I don't need to remember to run them again.
Yes, you don't have to sit there and go like, did I do that or not? Got it.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly. Right. So that's what I meant with multiple providers. So configure AI account isn't a single shot thing. Like you can do this as many times as you want, and then you have your choice. Anytime that you need to call a model, you can then make a choice like, do I go here or do I go there? Is where I am and what I need to send to the model, is it sensitive? Then probably use your own hosting. If not, then you can use one of the other ones. We talked about that. There is a great knowledge base article. I'll give you the link, Margaret, as well, so to include in the session notes.
Hmm.
Um, I would highly recommend that everybody who hasn't already go read that because it's a great summary of everything that we're going to talk about today and tomorrow. Uh, it also has a white paper um, that explains in a lot more detail what's in this knowledge base article. This knowledge base article is really just a TLDR. Like here are bullet points. If these bullet points don't make sense to you, go read the white paper for the full detail, right? But it's important to soak it up. Like this is fundamental stuff that we need to know about running your own AI server.
Got it. Yeah, I'll definitely share that link. So.
Yeah. So the Claris AI model server is deployed like this, right? So this is the interface that you will interact with. Um, and you'd be forgiven if you think that this is a FileMaker server, right? It looks like a FileMaker server. It's not a FileMaker server. Um, but you have to use the FileMaker server installer to get it, right? So it actually installs FileMaker server, um, and this is one of the key points that we're making in that knowledge base article and in the white paper. You don't want to be running the AI server on your FileMaker server for lots of different reasons. And what I mean is in production, right? Like if you want to do this on your dev server and your dev server has enough resources, I'm not going to say don't do it, right? I probably still won't do it, and I'll show you why in a bit. But on
Hmm.
a production server, you absolutely should not do that. The the AI server, the AI model server to be exact, requires vastly different resources than a FileMaker server. And when you use its functionality, it's very intense, right? Harking back to what we talked about yesterday and the day before, it's a lot of high level math, right? When you ask a model to do something, it's very, very high level math and a lot of it, right? Which is why uh, model servers, AI model servers, need a lot of graphics processing units, GPUs, not CPUs. It still needs CPUs too for its regular stuff, but most of the AI stuff is going to be done by GPUs. FileMaker server, the main FileMaker server has no use for GPUs, right? So typically you wouldn't have a machine with a lot of GPUs, whereas
Hmm.
for this stuff you must. So when you enable it, that's just that green toggle there. This toggle here, when you enable it right here, it will give you that URL that you then use. You take it back to that configure AI accounts, that endpoint thing. So you don't have to guess at what it is. It tells you what it is, right? So this is me, it says, so that you can then use it in that configure. And there's a very helpful copy right next to it, right? So you don't even have to type it.
Which is very nice.
Indeed. Right. So we spent some time on this yesterday, and just putting it here again. This URL, which is the URL that your AI model server will give you. Keep it in mind that anything that you do with AI inside FileMaker is just an API call, right? Just like all the other API stuff that you do. There's a URL, there's a JSON body, and there's a JSON response. There's nothing more to it than that. Right, so this Claris AI model server is not new at all, right? Like this is a screenshot from a FileMaker 20 server or a 21 server, it doesn't really matter. It would have that inside the FileMaker folder structure, right? The FileMaker server, there's a tools folder. Inside that tools folder, there's an open source LLM folder, right? So this is on the non-FileMaker 22 ones, and it's basically, even today, the FileMaker 22 one is exactly the same thing. Fundamentally, it's a microservice. It's a Python-based fast API microservice, right? If you're familiar more with microservices based on JavaScript, think of it as JavaScript as a language, Express as the framework for exposing things, all things microservice, a web server with endpoints and whatnot. So this is the same, but in Python, right? Python is the scripting language. Fast API is the framework that throws up a web server for you. So this is fundamentally all that the Claris AI model server is exactly that, right? So you could do this, and there's a Claris community live webinar that I've done in November of last year that walks you through the complete setup of doing this with FileMaker 21. Right, so don't think that if you're not ready to move to FileMaker 22 for some of this stuff, if you want to stick with FileMaker 21, you can set up a Claris AI model server manually. It's a fair bit of work. It's about an hour for me to go through this and do that. So in FileMaker 22, it really gets replaced with a wrapper around this that becomes a single toggle. Right, you install FileMaker server. You go to the AI services tab, you click this toggle, and everything that took me an hour to do manually now happens for you.
Yes, if it takes women an hour to do manually, I guarantee it would take a lot of us a lot longer. So thank goodness for toggles and Claris Engineering making things much simpler for us.
Absolutely, right? So it's a thing of beauty the way that it's deployed. It's my main concern there is that people see this in their FileMaker server and will decide to toggle it on just to experiment with that, right? Like
Oh, that would be bad.
that is dangerous. Yeah, that is dangerous.
Okay.
I don't know where it is in my slides, but I have a slide to actually show how you can turn that AI services tab off. Like if you want to deploy a FileMaker server, like a real FileMaker server, not a model server, and you don't want this to show up because you don't know who of the admins is going to get adventurous, you can completely hide that tab, and I'll show you how.
That's actually really useful. Okay, good to know.
So we talked about this throughout the last couple of days. So I mentioned that you can set up a Claris AI model server in FileMaker 21, but it can only do these two things, right? The thing it cannot do is this, text generation. That is new to FileMaker 22. The embeddings is something that existed in FileMaker 21, or FileMaker 2024 there, right? And this is also something that you'll need to remember. And there's some consequences to that we'll cover. The Claris AI model server can only run one model of each type. You cannot have two text generation models at the same time, one of each, right? So it can really host three models. They just need to be one of each type, one text embedding, one image embedding, and one text generation. So these are the AI script steps that we have, the functionality and the models that they use. We've shown this a few times in the last couple of days, so no big surprises there. and I mentioned yesterday as well how RAG is one that uses two types of models, right? It's the only piece of functionality that uses two models. So keep that in mind if you set out to do some RAG.
Real
All right,
quick about the model loading. Quick
sure,
question. If I wanted to have like multiple text generation models, for example, because they were trained on different sets of data, could I have multiple AI servers? So there's a model loaded on each one that I want to use. So I wouldn't
absolutely.
have to load and unload. Okay. I'm sure that'd be really expensive considering what you need for the servers, but it's a thought.
Yep, it's absolutely doable, and also this takes us back to the fact that to configure AI account, you can have multiple of those, right? So in that case, you would have one for each of your AI model servers. But yeah, there's nothing stopping you from having multiple servers.
Got it. Cool. Nice.
So these are the minimum system requirements specifically. This is not for FileMaker server, right? So this is specifically for the Claris AI model server. Um, Broken down into in rows the big areas of functionality, right? So embeddings, with the stuff that we already had, text generation, chatting in other words, and then fine tuning. And then we have our columns for Windows and Linux and for Mac. Um, Fine tuning, that's easy. We mentioned this yesterday. Fine tuning you can only do on Apple hardware. Like it's not possible right now, at least not with the FileMaker features, right? It is possible if you do it manually with different tools. But if you want to use the FileMaker fine tuning script step, you can only do that if you're on a Mac, right? I mean, your Claris AI model server has to be on a Mac. Um, The reason why the word only is in red in that first row is um, for those of you who were here when we talked about models and dimensions and parameters, right? Um, so dimensions is the size of the output of a model. The parameters is how brainy the model is, right? Like how smart it is measured in billions of parameters. And I also showed you that an embedding model is tiny in comparison with a text generation model, right? The one that I showed had 33 million parameters for embedding, but had 27 billion parameters for text generation, right? Uh, and that translates into physical size of the model. The file size of the model is tinier for embedding things. And here's the kicker that drives a lot of these requirements for resources. Ideally, the whole model needs to be loaded in memory completely, right?
The whole
If
thing?
the whole thing,
Okay.
the whole thing. Um, so if you don't, it'll work, but it's going to be very expensive swapping things in and out, right? So it's going to be slow.
Hmm.
I was going to use a fancy word, but the real word is slow, right? You don't want to be doing that.
Got
Uh,
it.
Again, if you're just experimenting or this is your dev server, yeah, like you can get away. But just keep in mind that the best experience from an AI model server is when it can load the whole model in memory. So, and that's why it says memory 16 gigs for that first row only, because typically these models, embedding models, are probably going to be around 300, 400 megabytes, right? So less than a gigabyte. So if you take into account what the operating system needs and what Python needs to run that microservice, so if you add like half a gig worth of model to that, 16 gigs is going to tie you over. You'll be fine, right? However, when we get to text generation and the models become gigabytes, and I mean like 7 gigabytes, 24 gigabytes, 48 gigabytes, 100 gigabytes of model, that's not going to fit in 16 gigs. That's not going to fit in your Mac Mini, right? It's
No.
uh, and I've crashed my a few machines, but by trying to make it work. It's running out of memory, right? Running out of usable memory. For some reason, computers don't like that.
Really? You
They
don't
they don't.
say.
They just don't. They basically just go home when you do. It's they say I'm done for the day. Um,
How
So
dare you ask me to do this? Yeah, okay, got it.
yep. So the minimum specs right here, where it says VRAM for Windows and Ubuntu and Unified RAM, like 32 gigs. Remember, this is still on a machine, right? So the operating system will need some gigabytes of RAM to operate properly. That Python thing will need some of its own. So when it says 32 gigs, don't think like, oh, I'll download a 32 gig model and it'll run. No, it won't, right? Like there's not. It's got to have. If you have a 32 gig model, you need to have 32 gigs of available disk space and then some uh, for it to load completely and operate, right? Because if you have a model that is 32 gigs, that has to go in memory ideally completely. But that's just at rest. As soon as you start asking it questions, it'll use more memory. If you add RAG data to it, a couple of gigabytes worth of RAG data, that has to be loaded in memory at the same time, right? So your 32 gigs becomes something like um, I don't know. It could easily be double, right? Kind of depends on what load that you put on there. So be very careful when you set out to spec a machine there to look at that.
Yeah, there's someone in one of our chats at some point when this first popped up that said these are very much the absolute minimum requirements, and they
They
were
are.
dangerously low minimums. Uh,
It's one of the reasons why I don't like. I know that Claris has to put them out there, like it's required. Like people will be looking
mhm,
for that, right? But
mhm.
I'm sure that many of us have had these conversations with IT departments or outsourced IT for one of our clients, where the IT will go read the minimum specs and say, Claris says that it should work at a minimum with this, so this is what I'm giving you, right? So that's always the struggle with these things.
Yeah, makes it very painful. We have a lot of questions that have materialized, which I don't think will surprise you. So
This is the point where I would expect them, right? So fire away.
let's start off. FMS AI services could serve of AI models to other platforms.
Uh, y- um, yes, with an asterisk. Um, the you would have to try. It kind of depends. One of the experiments that I have done is use Open Web UI, which is an open source interface, if you will, for it looks like ChatGPT. Actually, it looks like Claude too because it has different skins. Um, but it's something that you can easily deploy. You typically deploy it in Docker, but it's really like it's a full-blown chat agent. Like it has all the UI, all the bells and features, bells and whistles that you would want. However, it needs to interrogate, all of these tools will need to interrogate the AI model server to say, what models do you have, right? That V1 models endpoint that I gave you, it's one of the critical ones because any tool will need to know what models do you have, like which ones can I even call, right?
Hmm.
So, and there's something, although I said that the Claris AI model server is OpenAI compatible, the models endpoint actually isn't. So it kind of depends on the tool. So fundamentally, conceptually, and theoretically, the answer is yes. In practical terms, it kind of depends on how flexible it is to parse and read those the model's endpoints. But yes, right? Conceptually, it is just an AI model server, and you could use it for things to call it from outside FileMaker.
Uh, if FileMaker server uses mainly CPUs and AI mainly uses GPUs, if I go for a crazy amount of RAM, why shouldn't I be able to use a Mac server for both? Apple adds CPUs and GPUs together.
It's a really good question. Uh, a quick word on that before I actually answer the question on the in the Mac OS column there. When we says RAM, right? So it's got the word unified in there. It's actually something that Apple hardware does really well, right? Because if you jump into the Windows and Linux column, it says VRAM, right? It doesn't say RAM. It says VRAM, which is video RAM. Um, and the video RAM is the memory that is actually on the video card, right? It's not the memory that's in the machine, it's the memory that's on the video card, because that's sort of implied here when it says CUDA GPU required. What it really means is that if you're going to deploy this on Windows and Linux, you got to have a machine and your graphics card has to be NVIDIA. It has to be. It's the only thing that the Claris AI models server currently supports. And CUDA is NVIDIA's framework for basically utilizing those GPUs that are on the video card for that kind of stuff. So we'll come back to that. To answer the question, if you buy uh, again, the real answer is it depends, right? It's because any machine that you buy, and we're really talking about something like an Apple, like a Mac Studio, right? That has crazy amounts of memory, or at least you can configure it with crazy amounts of memory. Would it work? Yes. It depends on the size of the model. If you want to go for a crazy big model, and again, bigger models will give you better responses, right? You'll have more. It has more knowledge, more refined knowledge. So the bigger the model, the better, in essence. If you stick with this example here, with the minimum, and you have a Mac Studio with 64 gigs of RAM, um, that you're not going to be able to run a decent sized model with that, if that's also your FileMaker server, right? So even because my Mac Studio, the one that we'll use tomorrow for some demos, has 128 gigs of RAM, right? If I load a 40 gig model on there, the memory usage can easily go up to 90 gigs, right? When I said easily double of the size of the model, right? So even on a 128, and that's under fairly light load. Like if I have 20 users, I'm sure that I would break the 100 gigabytes memory usage threshold fairly easy, right? So you would need to get a machine that has at least 256 gigs of RAM, which becomes really expensive, right? So I think you'd probably be better off getting a, a smaller FileMaker server and a smaller AI model server if you want to combine them. I personally wouldn't do it, but it could be done, I think, with Apple hardware.
Is it possible to have a multi-GPU setup on a Linux server? Example, two RTX 5090s.
Absolutely. Right. So this is actually an AWS box. And as you can see, it has four NVIDIA video cards. These are A10Gs, each with 24 gigs of RAM themselves, right? So the answer to that question is absolutely. You can either a physical machine and then you actually install physical NVIDIA hardware cards, or AWS has them. Um, uh, Remind me to show you that tomorrow. AWS has a bunch of instances that have multiple GPUs, right? And they're kind of easy to find if you know where to look, and then you can decide whether it's worth the money for running these, right? So these things are not cheap, right? And we can get into costs tomorrow as well. I'll prepare it. I think this one is something like $8 an hour or something like that, right? So it's not cheap.
Yeah, which makes sense considering how much is stacked on it.
Yeah.
A bit confused by the specs here. For Windows and Ubuntu, text generation, it says 32 gigs, but then mentions an RTX 4090, which does not have 32 gigs of VRAM. It is 24.
Yep. It's that's a good pickup. It is a little confusing the way that it's laid out here. What they mean with the 32 gig is like combined across one or more video cards, right? So you're right. Even the one that I showed just now has 24 gigs of RAM, and that means that for any size model, I need to have multiple of these, right? Because the combined size of the VRAM on these things needs to get to the threshold that I'm happy with.
Hello from the Dominican Republic. If a user runs a RAG prompt, will it see all the data I upload to the AI server via RAG? Is there a way to separate the data for different users like admins and staff? Question mark.
That's a really good question. As it's currently configured, the answer is no. Actually, that's not true. Let's find out together.
Always down for an adventure.
Yes, let's go explore. I'm gonna go to this one will do. So this is not a FileMaker server. This is an AI server. This is my Mac Studio. So there's no databases hosted, anything. So it's really just for this. Um, this is the key here, right? So remember that I said you want to protect your AI model server with API keys, all right?
Hmm.
So this is the area in the Claris AI model server where you do that. So when I create a key, I give it a name, and it'll generate a key for me. But this is where you can, let's do RAG, right? So if I enable RAG for this key, I can set a space ID. And that means that this key will have its own RAG area, if you will, right? So this is how it segregates from the other keys. So you probably wouldn't do that for every user. Like you wouldn't want to set up every user with its own rack space. But if, as per the question, if you want to separate admins from regular users, then yes, right? So you would create one key for each and give them each their own rack space.
Okay, so what, you would make different kinds of rags that have like the limited information. So like, for example, an admin rag would have access to everything that you would put into it, but maybe like a sales one would have like reduced.
No, and that's where the original no in my answer came from. When you add data to a RAG, you have to specify the RAG ID, right? So there is no, so it's completely separated. Like there's
Hmm.
no overlap. If you have two rack spaces, one for admin, one for regular users, and they both need the same data, or at least some of the same data, you would have to add it to both rack spaces individually.
Got
Make
it.
sense?
Okay, I think so, yeah. Jacob had a comment about privilege set based rag space IDs. Where was the next question? TPU or mathematic processor is used by FMS AI? Question mark.
I no, I don't believe so. The frameworks that are being used is CUDA on Windows and Mac. Sorry, on Windows and Linux, and MLX on Apple. And those, I believe, don't use TPUs. They only work with GPUs. But I could be wrong about that. I'll try to find the answer by tomorrow.
There you go. Would three RTX 3060 12 GB GPUs work better than a single 24/32 GB GPU?
Um, a nuanced answer. The reason that it could be better to have three different cards is that the total number of GPUs could be higher, that versus the having the one that has more memory but may in total have fewer GPUs available to you, right? Because in addition to just having the video RAM, the number of GPUs you have available and also their speed, but the number of GPUs matters.
There you go. We have two questions here. One of them I suspect has a long answer. Probably jumping ahead, but how does the FM AI server handle load and multiple simultaneous calls?
Um, Well, it's just like a FileMaker, like a regular FileMaker server. It really depends on what hardware and resources you give it,
Mm-hmm.
what models you load versus the hardware that you have. Like if you pick models that really strain your resources, that really like fill up the memory just by loading the model itself, you're going to have worse performance than if there's lots of leeway in your resources. But in general, it handles it well.
There you go. Gemini, question mark. Are you asking if Gemini is an available model for us to use? 'Cause that's Google's, isn't it? Am I
Yep.
spacing?
The the models, let me go back to my server real quick. This is a bad example, I think. And this is a better example because this is a plain vanilla. I haven't configured this one yet except turning it on. So the models that you get by default, and we'll spend a lot of time here tomorrow But these are the models that come pre-configured, not pre-downloaded, right? But pre-configured, so that you don't have to go hunt for them. And here's the Gemma. It's not Gemini, but it's Gemma from Google and CoGemma. That's there. This is 12 billion. This is 7 billion.
There
Um,
you there you
and
go.
I'll also show you tomorrow how to go hunt for models here on Hugging Face, right? Once we understand what models we have and what they can do, where they go, that kind of stuff, all the practical stuff, we'll spend some time here so that you can actually look for some other models.
Which will be
So
fun.
short answer is you're not constrained to the ones that come pre-configured in FileMaker. You can add your own models with the caveat that they need to be compatible. And what that means is what we're going to cover tomorrow.
Excellent. Okay. We do have some last questions drifting in, but it's also end of time for you, and I don't want to keep you. So,
No, I'm fine. I can run a little long.
okay. Is there a list that exists of best to worst GPUs that you know of, since there are so many out there?
No, not really. Just like with any resources that we use in the business world, you'd want to go for something that is server grade, right? Enterprise grade, not commercial. Um, because the enterprise level stuff has longer mean time to repair, that kind of thing. Like it has a longer life cycle. It's more robust in general. Um, they're also more expensive, right? So it's what do you want to do?
Uh, this one, I see Jacob's answer, but I'll also toss it to you. What is the difference between the Apple Silicon CPU and the Apple Silicon Ultra CPU?
Really good question. The Ultra and the Ultras only exist at M3. There's no M4 Ultra. The Ultra is really two max cores combined. And in addition, it's the only Apple hardware machine that has the Apple neural engine built in, right? So the other ones have GPUs like the M4 Pro. Actually, my Mac Studio is an M4 Max, and it's really, really good. But it doesn't have that Apple neural engine built in. Only the Ultras do. So if you're serious about this AI stuff and want to host it yourself, the Ultra is the best machine.
And then the last one for today is Google uses an OpenAI compliant endpoint.
There's something missing from that question because at no point are we talking to Google, right? The these Google provided models. Where did we have them? Here, right? So these are just remember a model is just a binary file that you download, right? At no point are we talking to Google. This is just a model that Google created and then open sourced. You download the model to your machine and at no point does it talk to Google or anything like that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so the endpoint is provided by the model server, right? So this is the endpoint. It's that Python microservice that it basically acts as the web server for you to connect to, and by definition then has all the endpoints, right? So we don't worry about connecting to Google in any way, shape, or form.
Oh no, more questions are sneaking in here when I'm not looking. Every time I look back, a new one pops up, which is good. We're glad you're asking them. Going back to RAG, if I have a document for marketing, another for sales, another for IT, can I determine which user can access via RAG keys?
You could, right? You could. It, I mentioned you could create a key for a particular user and then give it to that user. But you typically wouldn't do that. That would be too much overhead. You would basically create those for if you really want to separate your rack spaces by domain, right? By knowledge that they contain. Um, the control over giving access to calls to that model is something that you would just control from your scripts, right? But by using the FileMaker account, by knowing which groups the FileMaker user belongs to, and then either allowing them to run that script or not allowing them to run that script.
Oh, there you go. Hopefully that answers your question. Uh, would a $5,000 Mac Studio as an LLM model deliver performance comparable to ChatGPT 4.0?
Or the short answer of that is probably not. Um, the 4.0 is a pretty big model. $5,000 Mac Studio is going to be the 96 gigabyte or the 128. I don't think you can get a 128 for $5,000. I think it's like the $7,000 range. So you're not going to get a lot of memory for your $5,000. So that means that you'll be constrained to models probably in the 25, 30 gigabyte range, and the 4.0 is way bigger than that. Now, I say that not dismissively, right? Because it could be that these models are going to give you the accuracy that you want, right? Maybe the 4.0 is overkill for you, um, and but you won't know that until you start experimenting and start evaluating those models to see whether you get out of them what you want.
Yeah, and I'm guessing figuring out what level of accuracy you need is always going to be a very personal discussion.
Exactly, right? Exactly.
Uh, Side note, you're gonna have to tell me when you want me to stop, Wim. So, because like I said, they're sneaking in every time I look back in here. You said that you should install this AI services FMS on a separate machine. Does that mean it's a clone? How do they talk to each other? Separate files talking to each other? Question mark.
I totally understand the question. The shorter answer is they don't talk to each other because they don't have to, right? So remember, the AI services model exposes itself as an endpoint, right? From inside FileMaker, let's see, do I have one here? I think I do. Right? So inside FileMaker, my FileMaker file is hosted on a particular server. My AI server model server is over there. This is how the FileMaker how FileMaker communicates with my AI server, just like it communicates with QuickBooks Online, just like it communicates with Mailchimp. Right? There's
Ah,
no
okay. So you're
there's no
not going
physical
through the
connection between your FileMaker server and the AI server. The AI server is just like any other API server that's out there.
that finally mentally clicked. I understood what you were saying, but like that finally tweaked something in my brain. Okay. I'm guessing the only time the server would ever talk to it is if you PSOS the script. That's not really the server talking to it. Um, that's more
I guess, yeah, I guess, but yeah,
uh,
that would be the same like if you use PSOS for
anything
QuickBooks
else.
Online, right? Yeah.
Yep, same concept. Okay. Uh, uh, could you create an could you create an FMS AI server farm? Question mark.
Yes, you could. Tomorrow we'll talk about specifically like what does that look like on my Mac Studio, and then we'll talk about like that AWS machine that I have. Um, the it's a matter of expense to some extent, right? And there's a third logical step in that progression. Like if you don't want to be running your own Mac Studio, and you think that getting these AWS instances is too expensive, there are serverless options for these kinds of things, right? And I have a working example with AWS Bedrock that I want to get through by the end of the week. That is a way better way to go than having a server farm, right? Because if you do serverless, it scales horizontally by default. Like you don't have to worry about hardware.
Hmm. There you go. Uh, Someone is asking specifically about a specific kind of Mac Studio. I want to use this for my server and AI, and down the line, I want to use this for AI only when it will need this hardware. Is that a well? It's kind of the same question from earlier, Yitzchak, which was he's looking at the where is it the 256 gigabytes of unified memory Mac Studio M3 Ultra chip with 32 core CPU, 80 core GPU, 32 core neural engine.
Yep, yep. It's a really good machine. Um, Under the context of what he's saying, like to experiment and to get going, absolutely, right? Like this machine is capable of having your dev FileMaker server load and your dev research AI load. Um, you'd probably want to split it off as a dedicated AI server if you put this in production and you expect a fairly heavy AI load on this, but that's a really good machine.
There you go. Okay. think we've wrapped up the questions. Thank you, Wim. Seriously, thank you for staying over the extra 10 minutes to answer.
Not a problem at all.
Much appreciated. All right. Everyone have a lovely day. Wim will be back tomorrow and Friday, and then we have Todd Geist next week. It's been a real pleasure having you on, Wim. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow.